So let's go to Catherine Porter the Grave. When I'm reading this at the beginning, it's not very long, right? When I'm reading this at the beginning, it reminds me of my childhood. Just kind of just free to go out and just be home by dark. Just be home by dark. And what I notice instantly when I read this are the gender issues. Clearly, there's gender issues. But at the beginning, you're kind of baited. You're kind of set up in the beginning because you think it's going one way and then bam, it shifts on a dime. So we have Harry as the father. We have Maria, who's the big sis. I get the impression of Maria. She's the typical, late teen. She lives fast and hard, and she's well liked, and she has a lot of friends and is always busy and kind of into a lot of things, and doesn't have a whole lot of time for her little sister. Her little sister is Miranda, and then there's Paul, which is the brother. Paul's 12 and Miranda is 9. 9 years old is very young to be going out with guns and shooting animals. I mean, it's very young. I would kind of, it's sad also because I mean, I have a daughter and this is not really the kind of world where you say to your daughter, yeah, just go walk. I don't care. You go anywhere you want, just ride your bike as far as you want. Don't even worry about anything. You'll be fine. Unfortunately, we live in a different world where you have to worry about things. But I can tell you growing up in San Angelo, it was very much like that. We didn't worry about anything. And that's kind of sad that that's gone away. But it's not to say I'm over restrictive for my daughter. I'm not. But you have to worry, especially when they're young. Nine, that's a lot can happen. Okay, so we start off like this. We're in Louisiana, then we come to Texas. And it is kind of this motif of the grave. And of course, a grave is a place where you put something to rest, put someone to rest, right? A grave is the finality of something. It's where something ends and something ends, I suppose. It depends on your religious views if something begins after that. But if even we have sayings about this, we put that argument to rest. What does that mean? We buried it. We killed it. We put that argument to rest. Oh, if I don't change my ways, I'll be 6 feet under. We have 1,000 sayings for this. Death is the end. That's the final marker. Ironically enough, Cormac McCarthy he said that if the central conflict is not death, he can't read it. Whatever. So anyway, this is the grave. Now I can see the double entendre there, right? It is a grave. Do you remember when you were a kid, very young, and you first realized that people die? I don't remember it from me, but I certainly remember it from my daughter. She came home from daycare, and she said, "Dada, what? People in daycare say that people die." And it just shocked me. This is your moment, isn't it? And I said, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the nature of things. You grow old and get sick, and eventually you die. Everyone does. This is a big realization for people. And when you're young like that, you go through a lot of realizations like that. And some of them are not very pleasant, right? We're in a cemetery. Paul and Miranda, they crawl into the graves. They took the coffins out because they sold that section of land, and they relocated the coffins to a big new public cemetery where they have a family plot. Okay, great. Miranda and Paul crawl into the graves. And I want to tell you from my public service announcement today, it is, I don't know if you realize this or not, but it is more dangerous to dig a hole in the ground than it is to be a police officer. Digging a hole is one of the most dangerous things you can do. I'm not talking about a post hole, but I'm talking about dig a big hole, getting down in the hole because it caves in on you. And so the first thing I think of when I see these kids jumping down in graves and disturbing things, I'm like, I have flashes of horror. I'm like, oh my God, that is going to come down on you. That's what I mean. You got to kind of watch. Okay, so what is it? Paul finds let's see, Miranda finds a dove, little dove that is something left over from the grave, I assume. And Paul finds a ring. They do just what brothers and sisters do. They fight a little bit and then finally they swap. And Paul is happy with the dove because he thinks it's the screw from a coffin. And that's cool for boys. It's boy stuff. Oh, it's cool. It has to do with death. She gets the ring. Now we start to see something. She's dressed in the clothes that you would need to live outside on a ranch, to go out and do the things that she was doing. You certainly would not want to be out there in shorts, heavens no, or dress. I mean, the attire that country people wear are there. It's for a reason, you know. My cowboy friends would always wear. They wear usually on the ranch. They wouldn't wear cowboy boots. I wore cowboy boots. I still do. It's ironic, but they didn't. They wore leather hiking boots, and just t-shirts but they always wore some kind of a hat and always gloves and jeans, good thick jeans. You wouldn't go out there in shorts and tennis shoes. No way, man. You get a thorn through your shoe in just a second. So she's dressed in the way that she should be dressed to go out and play around. And I think it's great. I think there's nothing wrong with girls doing anything they want to do, dress in any way. If she wants to go out and shoot guns, more power to her. Same thing with boys. You want to do the other? Fine. But I feel like she's dressed appropriately. But appropriate or not, what goes on in a little girl's mind? Back when I was a little girl, I think she's having moments of she realizes that she's either pretty or she's going to be pretty or she's supposed to be pretty or society wants her to be pretty, expects her to be pretty. And that ring is kind of a symbol. She gets the ring and she's holding it into the light, and she feels now all of a sudden she starts to have feelings like, I have to go take these overalls off and this hired man's hat, as they call it, and maybe put on one of my dresses and get real clean and just sit on the porch and swing. And there's that first kind of feminine instinct that makes her want to stray off into the world of a young woman and be more feminine and take more interest in being feminine, dressing in the way that society might want her to dress. Some people, many people, I would say, around the world especially, would be very shocked that kids would go around on the ranch with guns. 9 and 12-year-olds. I think it's very, very common. Very common. People when I was in high school brought them to school in the back of the trucks. They have a gun rack in the back of the trucks. They'd have their deer rifles and their shotguns. And sometimes they wouldn't even lock the darn things. It's just a different world now. But like I said, I'm no lover of guns, no way. But I think it's more normal than people think. And, I told you guys I traveled the world for a year, 18 months. That is one thing. There was all right, all right, all right. That was everywhere. There was Bob Marley everywhere. There was Baby, You're a Firework everywhere. And there was, anytime anybody met me, you bring your gun, boy. I swear I almost had a physical fight with some people in Stockholm. I was minding my own business. I swear to God. I was on the bus coming home or the trolley coming home at like 3 a.m. and everybody was drunk. And I was just sitting there. I was alone. I was just sitting there, just trying to mind my own. They all, where you from? And then there it goes. Guns, first thing, guns everywhere. People, guns. The world is fascinated with our fascination with guns. In any event, we have the two kids roaming around on the land, the property. She was already a good shot, a good shot. He wants her to quit spoiling her shots. It's 1903. Women didn't get the right to vote until 1918. So, I mean, it's still a society, a patriarchal, misogynistic society at this point, and it probably is now too. So, but she's living in this, and case in point, when she goes around dressed boyish, right, for lack of a better word, the older ladies, I'm on page 1007, she had met along the road old women of the kind who smoked corncob pipes, who had treated her grandmother with most sincere respect. They slanted their gummy old eyes sideways and at the granddaughter and said, "Ain't you ashamed of yourself, missy? It's against the scriptures to dress like that. Why, your pappy, what's he thinking about?" Miranda, with her powerful social sense, which was like a fine set of antennae radiating from every pore of her skin, would feel ashamed because she knew well it was rude and ill bred to shock anybody, even bad tempered old crows. Though she had faith in her father's judgment and was perfectly comfortable in the clothes. I love that. I love that. She had faith in her father's judgment. I think it's a good, I mean, we can all, maybe we all agree or disagree or think different things, but I think when you're young, a life outside is good. And COVID's teaching us that. You got to get out there, man. Get out into the sun. I don't know what's out there, but not this, right? So I'm a believer. In any event, now she has the ring. She's starting to want to go in and get clean and get pretty, and then it happens. It's just like kind of a normal story up until you can start to sense the gender issues, right? But then it happens. Paul, a rabbit jumps out, and Paul pow, kills the rabbit. Yeah. So he kills the rabbit, and he has his knife. He takes out his knife and he skins the rabbit. He's very, very diligent at it, very adept. He can take that skin off and just pull it off in one solid sheet. And the skin is used, ironically enough, strangely enough, weirdly enough. I mean, they don't use they don't make rabbit stew or anything. They use the rabbit skins to make dresses for Miranda's dolls, which she doesn't like dolls very much, but she likes to see them in fur coats. But when you're that young, do you really have a full grasp of things? So he shoots of course, it's a Bowie knife. We're in Texas now, by the way. He skins the rabbit. And then he says it was going to have young ones. The rabbit had been pregnant. And so then he basically dissects the rabbit and pulls out the baby rabbits and opens up the sacks and takes out all of the rabbits. And Miranda, first she says, "Oh, I want to see." She says it under her breath. She looked and looked, excited but not frightened, for she was accustomed to the sight of animals killed in hunting, filled with pity and astonishment and a kind of shocked delight in the wonderful little creatures for their own sakes. They were so pretty. She touched one of them ever so carefully. "Oh, there's blood running over them," she said, and began to tremble without knowing why. Yet she wanted most deeply to see. Having seen, she felt at once as if she had known all along. The very memory of the very memory of her former ignorance faded. She had always known just this. No one had ever told her anything outright. She had been rather observant. She had been rather unobservant of the animal life around her because she was accustomed to animals. They seemed so disorderly and unaccountably rude in their habits, but altogether natural and not very interesting. Her brother had spoken as if he had known about everything all along. So then she understood a little of the secret, formless intuitions in her own mind and body, which had been clearing up, taking form so gradually and so steadily she had not realized that she was learning what she had to know. And then everything changes. This is a major shift right here. It was one kind of story, and now it's a different kind of story. She was quietly and terribly agitated, standing with her rifle under her arm, looking down at the bloody heap. I don't want the skin, she said. I won't have it. Paul buried the young rabbits again in their mother's body, wrapped the skin around her, carried her to a clump of sage brushes, and hid her away. He came out again at once and said to Miranda with an eager friendliness, a confidential tone, quite unusual in him, as if he were asking her, as if he were taking her into an important secret on equal terms. Listen now. Now you listen to me, and don't ever forget. Don't you ever tell a living soul that you saw this. Don't tell a soul. Don't tell Dad, because I'll get into trouble. He'll say I'm leading you into things you ought not to be into. He's always saying that. So now don't you go and forget and blab out sometimes the way you're always doing. Now that's a secret. Don't you tell. Okay. Real quick, let's finish it up. She's in another country altogether. She's an adult. She's long after this. What is she? She's in the market, and there are something about the smells, something about the figures and the forms around her in the market brought back this moment horrifyingly. And she calls it like a without warning, plain and clear in its true colors, through a frame upon a scene that had not stirred nor changed since the moment it happened. That episode of that far off day had leaped from its burial place before her mind's eye. She was so reasonlessly horrified. She was so reasonlessly horrified. She halted, suddenly, staring. The scene before her eyes dimmed by the vision back then. She's apparently in India. That I call that I mean, for PTSD is like that. I mean, it's a lightning bolt from the sky. Some people will say, "Well, why don't you just try to let all that stuff go? Just think of something else. Don't try to think of that." That's not the point. You'll be having the most beautiful moment of your life. You'll be as happy as you've ever been. You'll be out with your friends. You'll be out doing whatever, what you love the most. And just out of the blue, it's like a lightning bolt. And it happens a lot. And for some poor PTSD people, it ruins their lives. So PTSD is a real thing. It's a bad thing. It can really, really screw you up. It's your mind is not. We think that your mind is resilient, indestructible. Anything that happens can be fixed. I'm not so sure. There's things that you can see that you just can't unsee. There's things that can happen to you that you just can't have undone. Does that mean there's no hope? Nah, there's ways you can cope with it. There's always hope. But I think if there's a lesson in that portion of the story, it is that see things that you want to see. See things that you want to remember seeing. Because you do have some say in where you go and what you do and what you put into your noggin. Do things that you want to remember doing. Do things that you want other people to remember you for doing. You do have some say in it. It's not always put upon you. Sometimes you took some part in getting there. And there's other things that you can't avoid, like your parents dying and you helping, being there. I mean, But in any event, okay, let's talk about something a little more happy. This story, what do you think about the gender issues? What did you key in on? I have to have my ladies in the class tell me, what do you think about this? The key question is, there's a moment in a young woman's life when you realize that your body is this organism that can create life, that the offspring, the babies, they grow inside of you, and then you nurture, and then you give birth, and then you nurture those babies with your body again. I've never been a little girl, but I can imagine that, just the head trip that must be. When you're 9, you're 10, whatever, you're just having fun, and then all of a sudden that little ditty is dropped from the sky on you like a nuclear explosion. The first face you gaze into, the first breath, the first, pretty much the first sound, the first touch is your mother. And she's the one who cares about you more than any, she would die. She'd light her body on fire for you. Always. She's your best cheerleader. She's on your side always. She's helping you. She thinks the world of you. She says you can do anything, gives you your confidence, teaches you what you need to know. And she's like the force, right? For me, my mother, in fact, it's kind of ironic. Just yesterday, uh, Sunday, was my mother's birthday, 2/28. And she's passed on now. But I just I posted every year I post on Facebook about her during her birthday, and I did it this year. And I thought a lot about her this year. And I when she died, it was like God quit speaking. I mean, the hole in the universe that was left by that is indescribable. I mean, it's like the deafening silence. I called my mother every day for 20 years and talked to her for an hour a day on the phone. We were like that. And I would just talk about anything. And then when she was gone, so I can only imagine what it must be like for someone to lose their mother when they're very young like that, right? It must create incredible trauma, I would think. And so I think that's part of it, sure. Because ladies, isn't it your mom that kind of tells you the birds and the bees? I mean, I left all that to my wife pretty much. I mean, I'll talk about it if we were talking about it, but it's really the mama that takes. Well, if you don't have that, right? I think most young women have this. They go through this first thing. I think well, a lot, I would say, when they first learn that about having babies and being pregnant, and that their body is, they are expected to do that kind of thing. I think a lot of them turn against it, and they say, no, 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 hell no. Oh, hell no, I'm not going to do that. Right. But then that lasts a while, and something starts kicking inside there. And boy, before long, you can barely keep them from it. Right. And it's beautiful. Without it, none of us would be here. Right. But I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on in a young woman's life that boys don't deal with. I mean, there's stuff boys deal with that girls don't, but I think girls their journey is much more complex, much more complicated by many, many factors, and and exacerbated by the fact that I think, and y'all can be mad at me if you want, but I think women are more complicated creatures than men, more complicated in a wonderful way, but more complicated, more in touch with their emotions, more emotions that vary at times, shift and change, um, not as prone to having a big meeting and fixing it, but just wanting to feel the emotions and let the emotions come. I think women have to deal with a lot of things that men and boys don't. Lots of physical things, and also lots of pressures, outside pressures, like, for example, society. And I think I feel a definite societal impact, a pressure, a peer pressure almost, on Miranda, to be a lady, right? You got to be a lady. Just like the old, what's your pappy thinking? Ain't you ashamed of yourself, missy? That's against the scriptures. What, wearing pants? I don't think so. I mean, I've read the Bible. I don't think it says you can't wear pants. But in any event, society, it wants to pigeonhole us into these gender categories. Now, I'm not saying all gender is created by society, because we do have different bodies and different chemicals and all that. But I think a big part of it is women are supposed to be such and such, and so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Boys are supposed to be da 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 da. What are boys supposed to be? Tough. You can't cry. You got to get up, son, rub some dirt on it. You're trained to be emotionally distant, to be emotionally vacant at times. You get hit, you get the wind knocked out of you in football practice or wherever, or you have a fight with your friend or whatever. You can't cry. You have to stand up, brush somewhere like a gorilla or something, right? But society wants you to be that way. They expect it, because what's the first thing your friends say if you're like, oh, you hit me in the face. Oh. I can think of a few expletives so okay. So that's something boys deal with. But with girls, it's kind of what we see here, right? Expected to be feminine and beautiful and all the cliche things that little girls are supposed to be. And this story is kind of hard to read, because I feel like she's living exactly how she should live. And this is the moment when society and her own kind of anxiety gets her. But not only that, but yeah, and I'll say this, and I may get in trouble a little bit, but I feel like women can be terrible to each other. I think women are amazing. Like, I'm total feminist. But and that's true. I just am. But I think women can be horrible to each other. And it works in ways like that. It's these really passive aggressive, off the cuff, backhanded compliments, and like, well, I guess you're not ugly. Right? So let's bring, oh, yeah, you can come out with us. You'd make a good friend. Right? I mean, just little things like that. And women and girls can bully each other. And then there's the word slut. I'm going to tell you something. I grew up with a bunch of guys, I can't remember any of my guy friends being like, oh, she's a slut. We don't think like that. It's the girls slut shaming each other. Right? One girl gets upset with another one and then it's like a Cold War that lasts forever. Fighting among girls is vicious and ruthless and never ends, seemingly. I mean, with my guy friends, we'd get in a little tussle fist fight. Oh, you might get a little busted lip or something. Maybe at the worst, a black eye. And then you'd be best friends forever. It's just so stupid. But yeah. And so we talk a lot about how gender is kind of determined or programmed by society, their expectations of society. And I think it is. But I think we have to give both sexes, I mean, it's not one sex doing it or the other. I think we're all equally guilty. Like men, I read a study once. Men, they just looked, I think it was at Disney World or something, and they surveyed the men coming through with their children. And the whole study was, what were the men doing with their boys versus their girls? Guess what? They had their girls, they were holding their girls right here, and the boys were tottering around on the ground. Get over here, son, be a man, go over there and talk to those girls. Okay, come over. And so we're all guilty. I think we're all guilty. But life is just a head trip. I mean, it's for everybody. We figure out we're going to die. We figure out how procreation works and all that.